the money that you see today, like even euro or dollars, that will have a digital version built on blockchain. Hello everyone, I am Manan Patel. I am Growth Accelerator at Ocean Protocol. Previously, I have an experience of around 10 plus years in Fortune 100 companies providing consultancy services and IT development. Some of the clients were Porsche, Vodafone, Cisco, General Electric, and Deutsche Börse. Since last 3 years, I have joined Ocean Protocol and are very actively participating in the blockchain and crypto revolution. Ocean Protocol is a decentralized data exchange protocol. What it means is data providers like yourself, myself, big corporations, institutions, governments can securely and privately share their data sets and monetize their data sets if they choose to. And they don't have to worry about the data privacy leakage or someone just checking their data sets and downloading the data sets if they don't want to. We have something called compute to data, which allows you to securely monetize your data by basically allowing algorithms from the consumer to be brought to the data sets, and the algorithm is trained on the data sets, and then the trained algorithm is sent back. That's how that you prevent the leakage of your privacy, and people even don't see what the data is about, but they get their algorithms trained. So it's a win-win situation for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Cool, thanks. Interesting. Just one question. So I'm here as a consumer or as a client. I provide my data and you manage the data, but not only that, you also analyze the data, so to say. Is that correct? Or
this is even better. So you actually keep your data. We don't take your data at all, right? Let me give you an example. So we act like a Google. So Google, what does Google do is Google have this crawler bots which do the listing of the websites, right? But you host your own website. Google does not take your website source code and everything from you. Yeah, it just says, okay, what your website is about. You give the context, you give the metadata about your website, and then Google lists it in their metadata engine, right? And that's what we do with the data. We list your data sets. We have like a consumer market. We have the data provider markets, and basically we match the consumers and the providers based on the on the perfect match. Mm-hmm. And we don't take the data, so you keep your data.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, thanks. Yeah, let's discuss this in further detail later. Thank you so much, Manan. Next panelist is Tara Merck. Tara is a strategy analyst from IOTA Foundation, and recently IOTA Foundation has created some news. It's just 1, 2, 3 days ago that the IOTA Foundation is one of the 7 contractors selected to design innovative distributed ledger technologies solutions to enable more demanding pan-European blockchain services by the European Union, I guess, European Commission or Union. That is super interesting, and I could see like also the IOTA tokens course spike up after the announcement, and congratulations for that. And Tara, the stage is yours to introduce us to IOTA, and thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Thomas. Also, thanks for inviting me. This is really great news that we were able to announce recently. I can go into more detail of what that's about if you want to, but maybe I can quickly start off. Introduce myself to everybody. My name's Tara. As Thomas said, I work for the IOTA Foundation. For those of you who don't know, the IOTA Foundation is essentially, it's a non-profit foundation registered in Germany, first of its kind. And the mission of this foundation or this organization is really to drive the development and the adoption of the IOTA protocol. The IOTA protocol is this open source technology. We like to say it's a blockchain without blocks and chains. And And I suppose we're going to spend a little bit more time talking about what exactly a blockchain is and all that later. So I'll get into that then. But what's really interesting about IOTA is that because it's this not blockchain type of thing, it is super scalable. It scales with more activity in the network. We're able to provide similar services at way lower energy costs. So it's environmentally friendly. And also when you use IOTA, you don't actually have to use the crypto token, which just opens up possibilities for a lot of use cases that are also interesting in the kind of discussion that we're going to have later. Maybe really, really briefly about myself. I come from a non-technical background, actually. I studied originally economics and information systems management in the Netherlands, Hong Kong, and Ireland. Spent a lot of time in the public sector and social startup scene before this hobby since 2016, which was crypto, became a little bit more serious. And I started teaching courses about blockchain technology at the IEEE and eventually came to the IOTA Foundation and here today. So thank you.
Great. Yeah, thank you for being with us. Super interesting. Yes, let's talk about blockchain and what it means later. Thank you so much. And last but not least, Fabiane Völter. She works in Fraunhofer Blockchain Lab, and her expertise and research evolves around the design and management of emergent digital technologies with a specific focus on blockchain technology and digital identity management solutions. That sounds interesting, but I think it also demands a little bit more explanation from you, Fabiane. Thank you for being with us on stage here and sharing your time. Happy to welcome you here. And the stage is yours to tell us a little bit more about what you're working on.
Thank you, Thomas, and thank you for the nice introduction. So yeah, I'm a researcher at Fraunhofer Blockchain Lab. We're integrated in the Fraunhofer FIT, which is basically part of the big Fraunhofer institution, which has many institutions focusing on different topics, and we focus on business information systems engineering, which means that within our organizations, we advise and support organizations with the engineering and with the management of technologies. And in our lab, we focus specifically on blockchain applications and more on identity solutions, as there has been quite interesting evolvements the last years. But I guess that's also something that we can talk about more later, which also has, in my opinion, a big impact on the IoT and the wearable industry. So I think that's a very interesting aspect. And I personally focus my research topics on the interactions of humans and machines, specifically including topics like privacy, trust, and security of applications. So I as well design applications, not the protocols, but the applications of specific technologies, as well as observe the management. And yeah, that's also my background. So I studied business and computer science. So that's where I ended up in.
Super. Thank you, Fabiane. That was interesting. And I think, like we have already covered quite a few topics here. And I would like to ask the audience, please let us know in the chat. Have you had any touch point with blockchain or other crypto-related technologies before? I would like to know that. And yeah, Julia is going to collect your responses, our community manager. That would be super interesting. That would also give us some orientation how deep we should go or how much we have to explain here. But nevertheless, I think we should start from the beginning. Tara, like you offered it already to our audience, could you please give us a little bit of an introduction about the fundamentals of blockchain, or some of the terms that we use all the time, concerned blockchain technology? What is blockchain?
So you need to stop me when I go too far, because this topic is never ending.
Yes.
essentially, blockchain it's a whole class of technologies that's essentially been evolving since 2009 with the launch of Bitcoin. Bitcoin, maybe this is always an interesting fact, was created by somebody called Satoshi Nakamoto. None of us ever, like, we still don't know who that is, that person or group of people. So there's a bit of mystery there, makes it all the more exciting. Bitcoin was launched due to the idea that people were really observing a shift towards more of the digital, like everything becoming digitalized in society. And they understood that, I mean, it has a lot of great possibilities. However, if we're talking about value and money in the digital, we have a problem, because essentially all digital files can be copy pasted and forwarded. And it's really hard to see which is the real one. So there's a problem if I want to send you a digital euro. How do you know that I just didn't copy paste that and made millions of it, where actually I only have one? This was essentially the problem that these early type of people tried to set out to solve. And they wanted to do so without having a single intermediary who could be a bank or a PayPal. This was the traditional type of thinking going on back then, who basically says, I know Thomas' account details, I know Tara's account details. If Tara sends Thomas €1, we have €1 plus on your side and €1 minus on mine. The problem here being that these intermediaries obviously have a lot of power. So if the bank just decides to exclude me from that system, there's little I can do about it. If the bank decides to just transfer 2 instead of €1, there's again little that I can do about it. So the question was how to transfer value online, transact value online, without relying on these intermediaries, such as banks. And essentially how they went about it was to create a distributed ledger. If we say plus €1 and minus €1 on the other side, all we're doing is putting numbers up and down, right? And we're writing them down in a book. Usually the bank will have insights into that book, but what these people said is, or what Bitcoin said back then, was it would be interesting if we all are able to observe all the transactions going on in our network and community. Then all of us know what has happened previously. So we all know when somebody's trying to cheat going forward. I'm happy to go into a little bit more detail of like what blocks and chains and transactions are. And
yes, thank you so much. Like we have 50 minutes left, so we have a little bit more time. We shouldn't spend too much time on the fundamentals, but just let me make a quick sum up. Like what you said is, before or normally in the internet, everything is copyable or is even copied. If you send out an email, the email stays on your computer and it gets copied to the other computer. If you send a picture, the picture stays on your phone and it gets copied to the other phone. Now, what the blockchain technology makes unique, you send something out, like that's the user experience at least, and it leaves, it goes away from you and reaches somebody else or something else, like some information. It's clearly not yours anymore. And that is something maybe that was new with blockchain. Did I describe this in a way correctly? Like, is this the new invention of blockchain, to make something uniquely identifiable on the internet? Like, for example, €1, one digital euro, one block, one Bitcoin, or whatever it might be.
Yes, uniquely identifiable would be a different discussion, but okay. To make a digital file that you can't infinitely copy paste without recognizing which is the real one, right? So, yes. And I mean, the whole understanding of money in economics and stuff is founded on scarcity, right? If you have very limited amounts of something, it will probably become valuable, is the idea behind it. However, in the digital space, usually we didn't have limitations on anything because everything can be infinitely copy pasted. This is the fundamental problem.
Okay, great.
But
great.
Yeah.
Manan, I don't know if you wanted to say something. Just if you want to say, because we are already in the discussion, we can go through the fundamentals discussing, and then we can go to the next point with Tara. So if you want to say something, just go ahead.
Actually, so Tara explained it well. She also touched based on concept of cryptocurrency, which is a kind of an application on the blockchain. Yeah. What I'll do is just, I'll not touch base on cryptocurrency, but just explain a very simple example what blockchain could be understood with. Imagine there is a Google sheet, right? It is kind of a ledger, right? Because you are putting in details, you are managing accounts or whatever, right? So it is considered as a database as well, right? But right now it is controlled by Google. Yeah, Google has the sole power. Whatever you put in, Google can change the values, Google can put it down. Even US government can ask Google to put it down, right? But what if the same copy of Google Sheet is maintained and managed by thousands of people, millions of people over the world in different jurisdictions everywhere, right? And no one will be able to make changes in that Google Sheet without the consent of majority of these Google Sheet owners. Yeah. So this is the blockchain, right? Because you can't tamper with it without majority of the people agrees on that, right? What happens is if Google shutdowns, if US bans it, it can still live because there is another copy somewhere else in the world, right? And this is the fundamentals of blockchain, which, as Tara explained, Bitcoin and other things are based on, right? So tomorrow, even if the third world war breaks out and half of the continent dies, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies will still survive.
Okay, great. So we have covered 2 points. Thank you, Mana. We have to cover 2 points. It makes a digital asset scarce. That means I cannot just copy it as often as I want. And it makes it secure in a way. So once a transaction is confirmed, once the whole network agrees on €1 goes from Tara to Manan, then it is written inside of a sheet, kind of Google sheet. It's like €1 goes there. Everybody knows that, and now you cannot change it. If you change it, the others will know it, and they will say, no, that's not correct. Exactly. And that's the mechanism that allows us to really have a secure transaction, and nobody can change it afterwards. No monarch, no king, no politician, no private company can change it.
There is only one way this can put down. So Bitcoin can be put down if everyone in the world agrees that, okay, it needs to be put down. But history tells us that humans don't agree on a single thing, right? Everyone has their different opinions. So yeah, so Bitcoin and crypto will live forever.
Okay.
And, yeah. Yes. Just to add to this, because Manan, you touched on the fact, okay, I explained cryptocurrencies a little bit, and there's a difference arguably between cryptocurrencies and blockchains, right? With blockchain being the way that Bitcoin was made digital cash, that met these requirements that I outlined before. And now a little bit what the question is what are people writing in their Google Sheet? Is it transactions of Bitcoin, or is it other types of data, such as coming from IoT devices? And here's really where the difference lies. So you can use these magical Google Sheets or notebooks or ledgers or whatever you want to call them for all sorts of purposes, which makes them very interesting also in business application and fields outside of pure cryptocurrency. However, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency was the first application, then many say, of a blockchain, because the ledger stored transactional data on such tokens or coins.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks for that we now transition to what this can do, finally reaching out to wearables and IoT. But okay, because for me, I said it before when we talked, it was in the beginning, it was very confusing that Bitcoin, the term Bitcoin, means the whole system that it works like, this whole Google Sheet system with the different blocks, and we don't have to go too much into details, but the mechanics behind it, how it works. And Bitcoin is also the coin. And that was for me, when you come from outside, to understand the difference, it took me quite a while. So Bitcoin, let's say the Bitcoin money, it is just numbers in the sheet. I take a little bit of money here and move it there, back and forth. And Bitcoin technology is, so to say, the whole sheet. And now when we talk about different kinds of different kinds of systems, because there's not only Bitcoin out there, you mentioned it, there's other things that have other use cases. Very often they talk about their system, and both of you, Manan and Tara, and also Fabiane, you're going to explain more about it, but I would just want to explain this a little bit. There's the system, and then the things that you move on the system, it's tokens or it's native coins. So can we talk a little bit, Tara, you already went there. Can we talk about what this can be besides numbers that describe how much money you have? It could be other things, right? And what could that be? And I think that leads also to Ocean Protocol then. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, usually we're talking about transactional data in all of these ledgers type of things. And now there's a question of what do we do with that data? So this could be used to transact data from an IoT device, et cetera, et cetera. However, I think what we're also like looking for a little bit is that there are these tokens, and tokens can represent anything. Essentially, they are scarce digital representations of whatever we want them to be, and thereby fulfill different purposes. And I think, like, first of all, what's important to note is that this is still a young and very emerging type of field. Also, if you look into regulation, there's a lot of regulation being piloted like differently across the world right now to understand what are these different tokens, like how do they fall under our separate jurisdictions. I think a popular way of differentiating different, or like understanding different things that tokens can do is to split them up into what we call payment tokens, utility tokens, and security tokens. A payment token would be something like Bitcoin, where people said, we want to use this digital money and actually pay stuff with it. So we want to use a token as money, essentially. So that's one use case that we can discuss. Another one that's very interesting is the concept of utility tokens, where a utility token essentially is like a voucher that represents you gaining access to a good or service. So we could talk about a utility token in the mobility industry, which I then use instead of like printing my ticket at the BVG. I'm here in Berlin. I use this token, which shows that I have access to a certain subway ride or other things. So there's a lot of like possibilities to implement and think about here. And then the last one is what we might want to call a security token, and this goes more into what we are used to in the traditional financial realm, where it's all about financial assets, so shares, stocks, derivatives, securities in the traditional sense, and having crypto tokens kind of represent that side of things.
That is very interesting, because I think the important thing for us, because wearables also touch into the real world, they are part of our Internet of Things, so to say. It's hardware. So what I think is important to understand, tokens, it can be in the virtual world and it can represent coins, you can pay with it, but then it can also represent something that's happening in the real world. Like it can be a virtual clone of something. I can say, I have this glass, it belongs to me, and in the virtual world, this glass is represented by a token. And if I move the token to you, then you own it, and it's your glass now. I think that is so interesting and so revolutionary, that now something that is it's in the virtual world, it's there, but it's also physical, and I think that's important. Gamers and people who play video games, they have an advantage because they know this concept of I give you my sword in the game or something. But now it's also a real thing out there, and I think that's cool. So yeah, so cool, good, interesting.
May I
great.
add just one
Yes.
last thing regarding tokens and cryptocurrencies? So I think this is also very important, that at the end of the day, you don't necessarily need tokens or cryptocurrencies for blockchains to add value in some cases, and also to function. So this is like an add-on, but there may also be just a blockchain recording transactions or recording some other data. So that's not necessary for the functioning of a blockchain at the end of the day.
So may I jump in? Yeah, it depends. So I would say it depends, right? If you are building on existing blockchain solutions, then you don't need tokens, right? But for Bitcoin, for example, let's take example of Bitcoin. It was necessary to create Bitcoin because, as I mentioned, that Bitcoin is secured by a lot of nodes, right? That make sure that everyone agrees on certain transactions. Now, running these nodes cost electricity, energy, and efforts, and it's like you are actually spending efforts, and you need to be compensated for that, right? And that's where Bitcoin as a token was created, where these miners, we call them miners, the node operators, were compensated with BTC tokens, Bitcoin tokens, yeah, to actually maintain the nodes and to confirm the transactions on the network. This is how the network started growing, because more and more people saw, oh, the price of the Bitcoin token is rising and I can make profit out of it, right? And this could be a viable business. And that's how the mining farms were created in China and other countries where the electricity was very cheap. So in Bitcoin's case, in Ethereum's case, tokens are necessary, right? Because otherwise the network will not be secure, because people will just stop running the nodes.
Yeah,
I think, yeah.
I agree with you regarding Bitcoin and Ethereum, but there are also cases where the participation in the network is incentive enough to participate, and you don't actually need to compensate the parties because they actually are incentivized inherently to participate within the network. So I don't think that applies to all cases.
I can in fact give one example of where it is not necessary, right? So imagine now we are talking about wearables, right? And maybe fashion, right? So imagine the consortium of fashion tech, or fashion corporations like Versace or Dolce & Gabbana, and everyone like come together and form a consortium, right? And they're on their own blockchain. There are different types of blockchain now, proof of stake, proof of authority, right? In that case, since it is ran between organizations, like internally, permission blockchain, they don't need the tokens, right? Because they just need to make sure that no one is tampering with the transactions, no one is tampering with the, certain authenticity. They need proper proofs, maybe for governments or some, auditing various reasons. So in that case, there is no need of token, because these companies can, afford to run these nodes and crypto blockchain and everything. Yeah. So,
and
yeah.
maybe here, just to make the general distinction, because you just brought up permission blockchain, right? And what's like the difference here, if we go back to this example of our Google Sheet, that is not maintained by Google, right? But everybody has a copy from it, and like magically, whatever we write on it appears for everybody to see. I think these Google Sheets, being the blockchains, they are different, right? There's differences as to who has a Google Sheet. Is there a limit and like certain requirements if you want to also be part of our sheet? There's differences as to who can write onto the Google Sheet. There's differences as to who can read the Google Sheet. And if you configure the Google Sheet in a certain way that you have some permissioning going on as to, especially, I guess, the writing, or this is debatable, right? You can design systems in different ways, but then I agree, in these more permission systems, you don't need a cryptocurrency to incentivize participation. However, if you have these permissionless public networks, which is the idea behind Bitcoin and Ethereum and such cryptocurrencies in many cases, is that anybody can join, anybody can write, anybody can read, and anybody can be part, theoretically, in maintaining the system. And if you want these requirements and your system to, meet all of that, then I guess up until now, we have seen tokens being an important incentive mechanism, but which doesn't mean like permissioned blockchains.
I really like the discussion. Thank you so much. I think it's fun listening to you. Because we got feedback from the audience that many people do not know so much about crypto and blockchain. And I just want to catch them and take them with us. And sorry, guys in the audience, if we lose you at some time, I'm sorry for that, but maybe we can leave you with some information in the chat with some links, or we send it in our newsletter or something where you can learn more about the whole topic if you're interested. So we mentioned different terms here: proof of work, proof of stake, and Manan, you also mentioned Ethereum. So let's define a few terms, the basic ones. What is proof of work? And then let's discuss also what kind of different approaches are there out there. And then let's go into digital identity and all these topics, okay? So, but let's take a few minutes to define why does Bitcoin, the Bitcoin technology, why does it come with proof of work, and what is proof of work? And why is it such a topic that many people think is difficult? You know?
I'll try to again go back a step back and take a real world example.
Thanks.
For the audience. Yeah. So if you consider Bitcoin network, the blockchain, as a corporation, right, and where anyone can join for working, jobs and everyone. Now, if you want to make the payments, you need to present some, you need to get some proof of work, right? People has to show that they worked actually, right? Because no one is managing these people. Like there is no supervisor saying, hey, I'm assigning you this task, you do this, you do that, right? But so if you have worked as an employee there, you show some proof of work, right? Now coming back using this fundamental concept to the blockchain, as I said, the work done here is the miners who is running the nodes to secure the network, right? Now, when some transaction happens, yeah, every of these nodes has to agree, at least the majority of them has to agree on that, okay, yeah, that you sent me €1, that's true, right? And not the other way, yeah? And for that, everyone needs to present some proof that, okay, this transaction happened, yeah? Technically, it's more complicated than that. There is some particular, mathematical formula that need to be solved. But in simple terms, everyone, tries to prove that this transaction happened, right? And only one of them succeeds. Yeah, because there is some complicated formula going on. So only one of them succeeds, and whoever succeeds, right? The payment is made to that person. Okay. And payment is the Bitcoin mining reward. Yeah. And then everyone agrees that, yeah, okay, this was the work done. And this person was the first one who reported that this was the work done. And then that work or that transaction goes into the big Google Sheet.
Okay. So I think we have to differentiate in between the money, the reward that the miner gets, and the money that should be sent.
Yes.
So I want to send to Tara €1. I give it to the network. The network consists of many, many nodes.
Correct.
And if I want to do that, they have to solve a puzzle. Yes. They try to solve a puzzle in order to create the block, right? Correct. And one block is like one new information block in the whole system. That says, I transferred €1.
It's a one row in Google Sheet. You can consider it.
One row in the Google Sheet, yeah. So, and we want to be in that row, so everybody knows that I transferred the money.
Correct.
So now, in order to create a new row, something has to happen, and that is solving. I would say it's solving like a puzzle. It's rolling the dice.
Yeah, exactly.
Rolling 10 dice, and if you have 10 times a 6, then you're the one to create.
The thing is, it was not necessary to create something like that, right? But if there are 50,000 people who is running the nodes, how can the network decide that who to compensate or who to give that reward, right? So for that, it is intentionally made, let's say, difficult to find this solution, right? Mm-hmm. If you are running a computer with very high specifications, like very fast graphic cards and all these things, right? You can solve this puzzle faster. You don't have to do it manually, by the way. The computer does for you. The Bitcoin software does for you.
So, so I want to do a transaction to Tara, and somebody else tries to solve a puzzle for us. So we create a new entry in the Google Sheet. And if they solve a puzzle, we can have our transaction, but they also get a reward. And this reward at blockchain, this is a reward that they get for solving the problem, for doing the work. And by doing this, the whole system gets more secure, because nobody can do all the work again to solve all the puzzles and manipulate the Google Sheet. right? Okay. I didn't want that because we are
yes.
now half through the discussion. I just saw that it's half an hour and we have so many topics. I think, sorry for the audience. We are now going ahead for the next topics because that's why we're here all together, right? So, let's talk about the real life value of blockchain. What is a real life value of this technology besides I can transfer money? We already talked about it. Tara explained a few categories, but what else is there? Maybe Manan, before we go to digital identity and so on, Manan, with Ocean Protocol, what can you do?
Oh, with Ocean Protocol. So Ocean Protocol, so we are not our own blockchain, but we are a protocol or a network built on Ethereum and other blockchains. Yeah. So what we do is we provide tools to the people, right? Where people can securely monetize their data. So right now you have data, I have data, right? We have financial credit card statements. We have our own like identities, passports and everything, right? And of course, I mean, data is the big play, right? Google, Facebook, they are data companies. They are not product companies, right? They run on data. They are selling data to people. They are giving you free products because you are giving them data, right? It's not actually free. You are the product. And they are using your data in a way that you don't know. Also, you don't get, so when Google makes like when Google file taxes for like 200 billion income, you don't get a single currency, single coin from them, right? You don't get revenue shares, but they actually made money on your data, right? So what Google does is turn the tables around. So you can keep your data to yourself, but you can list your data saying, hey, I have this credit card statements, I have this data, right? If you are a corporation, you said, I have this many data of customers or consumers, let's say an automotive car company, like 1,000 customers, self-driving data, right? And I want to sell it for $100, for example, yeah? And then you list it on our market and we make sure that your data, you keep your data privacy, yeah? And the data actually, when it sells, an algorithm from the consumer, like AI, ML algorithms, is brought to your data, yeah? And the algorithm is trained on your data. The consumer still doesn't see your credit card statement. They even don't know who you are, most likely, if you're not mentioned that, yeah? And the trained algorithm is sent back to the consumer. And honestly, the consumer is only caring about the algorithms, right? Because they want to train the algorithms. They want to improve their AI. They actually are not particularly interested in watching, like, your financial transactions and your financial status, yeah? So it's a win-win for both the parties, and you get to make the money from your data. Yeah, so this is what we facilitate at Ocean Protocol.
Okay, thank you, Manan. So data management, data ownership.
Non-custodial data management. So we don't take the custody of your data. You keep the data with
the
you.
data is left with me, but you give me a platform to do this.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks. Fabiane, I know that you also into many real life use cases. Yeah, like you're a researcher on this. Can you give us a few examples of where blockchain gets used in an, let's get into the IoT topic a little bit, Internet of Things, hardware in real life. What is the hottest stuff that you're working on at the moment, Fabiane?
Yeah, sure. So first thing, which I think is the most important aspect about blockchain. So we just talked about a lot of transactions being stored on a blockchain, but you never should store plain text data, any personal data, any important data on a blockchain, also not in a hashed form, because you never know what the mathematical algorithms will be able to solve in the future. So basically, this technology is not fit to store or to serve as a distributed database. So I think that is very important to emphasize. So now, on the other hand, you probably ask, okay, we heard now a lot about data being stored on blockchain. What do we do now with the technology? So what we have been working on the last 1.5 years quite intensively, and looked at what are proofs. So the idea behind proofs is that you only store that you have done something without storing what you actually did. Which allows then to create really privacy preserving applications. And that's probably quite abstract, so I will try to give an example. For example, if you look at the energy sector, you have big companies which distribute energy from the sources to the consumers. And I, as a consumer, I do not know whether that company in the middle did actually distribute or actually bought sufficient green energy to supply me green energy, because I can't check this with my physical energy coming out of my home. So what this company could now do, they could create a proof that these calculations of inputs and outputs is correct and store them on a blockchain, which allows me then to verify this proof without actually knowing what these total sums were, because that is, again, quite important data that I, as a consumer, should know and that the market shouldn't know. So I think these applications where you only work with proofs are very promising for the future, because we have seen quite a few applications by now which do not pass regulations like the GDPR, which is quite important in the European region, and which actually forbids you to put any data on a ledger permanently, because you have the problem that you can't go back and you can't delete the data again. So these regulations are actually quite important.
Okay. I think just to slow down a little bit, thank you so much. So, okay, we're talking about regulation, we're talking about so many topics. Tara, maybe this is the moment to explain a little bit more what you are going to build for Europe. I mean, just very short, because I mean, that's where also legislation comes from. Yeah, maybe, I don't know if you can say, make it short, but yeah.
Absolutely. Before that, I want to say the exact example that Fabiana just gave, tracing green energy, is also a project that we're implementing currently under an EU project called City Exchange in Norway, where you can trace, a house having solar panels producing energy and charging your car, for example. So I think that's a really interesting use case. But now, what's really exciting is essentially that IOTA was selected as 1 out of 7. We're actually proud to say we came up first place there by the European Commission to make a proposal as to the type of blockchain that they could use to host certain public services on. What does that mean? The whole project goes under the name of the European Blockchain Services Infrastructure, short for EBSI or EPSI. And what they want to do is that they realized, hey, we're a bunch of countries, right? And we offer our citizens different services. So this could be healthcare. It could be that I, from Germany, drive over to France and the police stops me and wants to check my driver's license. It could be, me showing identification somewhere else. So all sorts of things, and getting then access to public services in a different European country that is not my own. So they were wondering, how can we as European countries provide some of these public services to our citizens and companies in a good way, and realized that actually these decentralized distributed technologies, such as blockchain, are probably a good way to do it. So this is their end goal, to provide some of these public services using decentralized distributed technologies. And the question that they have right now is, which one should they use that fits all their requirements? And essentially, IOTA is now in the closer selection for being one of those underlying technologies in the future. And we're working really hard together with the team and aligning with the Commission on how to make that happen. But it's going to be a process that runs over the next 3 years, I think.
Nice.
And there's some very interesting use cases also here that the European Commission is envisioning to be running on this.
Okay. One question, like it's out of the blue, like, but why do you think they do not plan to make their own blockchain project? Why do they ask like companies or institutions like IOTA Foundation to do it? What do you think?
So I think like we need to realistically say that these technologies are very new. It's a very specialized topic. It brings together a lot of like very expert knowledge areas. And the way also the job market looks right now is it's pretty tight. You know, there's like a war for talent if you look at blockchain type of thing. I think last year or the year before, LinkedIn listed blockchain as one of their most sought after skills or something like that. So I'm not sure what the reasoning is per se, but I would also expect, like, it's not so easy to build these technologies in a good way. And there are organizations and people around the world who have this know-how and expertise, and obviously can build these infrastructures.
Do you think, maybe Fabiane or Manan, do you think that these private companies or institutions, they don't have to be commercial, but do you think they are like, how can I say in English, like running ahead, like policies and politics, they're trying to follow, but everything is going so fast that they're even behind in like planning and everything, because already we have thousands, 10,000 projects out there with all kinds of specific solutions. Do you have a feeling that pace is so high that it's almost impossible for our traditional society to follow here? Because I think there's big changes ahead.
Yeah, that's exactly the thing, right? So DeFi, NFTs, like, and other technologies outside flying so fast. Yeah, even personally, even I am, you know, I have not taken a vacation. Like I'm kind of like having this FOMO of, I'm afraid that if I go on vacation for 1 month, when I come back, world have moved forward, right? So it's going so fast. Every day there's 100 new projects, you know, and yeah, I mean, it's difficult to catch up for the governments, and so that's why they are, you know, they are finding out the technologies that fit their, you know, requirements.
Nice.
But
yeah, Fabiane, go ahead, please. Yeah.
But I also think it's important to observe here that politicians and politics is in a very different position than private companies. So I don't think that so that's my personal opinion, that a government should be investing in every new technology, but maybe sometimes it's also be kind, as they are actually holding tax money, and this is not privately funded money, to watch first and see what actually has long-term value before they invest. And I think this is something that we see a bit too much maybe sometimes, but I think it's not as bad as it looks at the first look.
Also, I mean, it is it's going to be very hard for the government to even, like, you know, launch on the public networks that's prevalent right now. So what they would probably opt for is a blockchain networks, but privately managed by government institutions. But still, you know, they will adopt the new technologies, but they will still have their own flavor on top of that, right? So it's not realistically to expect that the governments will, you know, use Bitcoin or Ethereum. They have their own version, which is called CBDC, right? Central bank digital.
Central bank currency, yeah.
And there also are big initiatives funded, for example, by the European Union. So there's EPSI, so that's the European Blockchain Service Infrastructure. For example, there's something happening here in Germany. The government is investing really heavily in blockchain-based identities, called self-sovereign identities. So there's a lot of funds currently offered. So I think there is actually stuff happening.
Okay, Fabiane, let's stick to this topic, self-sovereign identities. Can you explain to us a little bit how that relates? I mean, identity, we think about persons or maybe ID card or something. Okay, I understand. But can you explain how this could relate to our topic, Internet of Things, machine communication, and so on? How does that change things like they are now? What do you think? Like, how can
Sure.
blockchain change our reality here?
Yeah, sure. So first, maybe we need to do a very short introduction to digital identities in general. So if you think about your identity today, you have your wallet in your pocket where you have your physical ID card, which you show to authenticate yourself, for example, in front of an authority or to rent a car or whatever. And in the digital world, this doesn't really work. So maybe you have opened a bank account online, which is when you did, for example, video ident, where you hold your ID card in your webcam and talk to some person on a video basis. But that is not really secure. So you don't really know what data is actually taken from your ID. You don't know what will happen with that data that is recorded on the other side of the other person. And we also have a very federated identity system on the internet. So for example, you have your account with Facebook, you have your account with Google, you have your account with whatsoever, and have a lot of identity pieces which you have to manage. And this actually motivated the emergence of self-sovereign identities, which is basically your physical wallet moved to the digital world. So if you think about your smartphone, if you think about a credential-based identity, which self-sovereign identity is, that means you own your credentials. So you own your physical ID card in a digital form, which means that you never give them out of your hand. You only show them or show a proof of that identity card, but you always have it with you in your personal wallet. So that is very important. And also there doesn't need to be an interaction between the issuer and the verifier, just like in the physical world. So if I want to rent a car and I show my driving license, the person I'm interacting to doesn't need to contact the authority whether this driving license is still valid, but they can see it from the wallet, from the ID card. And that is the idea behind self-sovereign identity in a nutshell. So this is identity between people, right? And if we think about a connected world and a world full of IoT, then it is essential that not only people, but also sensors, assets do have an identity to authenticate themselves. So for example, if you think about two cars on a motorway, we want to have autonomous cars in the future. And for example, there is a traffic jam in front of the car driving in front of you. So that car can then communicate to my car, okay, there's a traffic jam, please hit brake. But is that car in front of myself trustworthy? Yes, you can check that with the use of credentials. If you don't use credentials, then the car would first have to communicate back to the manufacturer, which then communicates back to the car, which would take a lot longer. So if we would have credential-based identities for example, cars, they can very quickly communicate and authenticate themselves, which is then, for example, an application in the for the connected world. And you can apply this scenario to basically a lot of assets. I wouldn't say all, but to many, many.
Mm-hmm. Great. So just to sum up a little bit, because I'm trying to focus, I want to focus on the wearable topic. The blockchain or crypto topic means that we are decentralized. And that also has an advantage that we do not have to communicate to a central entity. Devices can communicate in between each other.
Yes.
And they know without having to look somewhere else, this is a true other device.
Yeah.
And I think that is something very important for Internet of Things, I guess.
Yeah. exactly. And if your question now is, where does blockchain come into play? The answer is, it doesn't necessarily have to come into play, but it can, for example, for the validation of those credentials. So you don't necessarily need blockchain, but in the most use cases we do see today, they rely on a blockchain foundation, which then allows to check some mathematical accumulator. So again, the validation of that credential isn't plain text written into a blockchain, but there's some mathematics behind it, which I wouldn't go into detail now, which allows then to check whether that credential is still valid or not.
Okay.
I'll just maybe add on what Fabian said. And yeah, very good example, by the way, with the wallets and physical wallets and everything. So the blockchain here, where does it help with the devices, right? So now when machine is talking to a machine, right? When sensors are talking to sensors, and they may be exchanging information, they may be exchanging even like tokens, right? Because someone is buying and selling via sensors. Then in that case, blockchain becomes the proof, right? Because you can't tamper with the blockchain. So you can actually monitor all the transactions on the blockchain, right? You can give transparency, you can give auditing, right? So imagine that there are like thousands and thousands or millions of the devices communicating with each other. You need to have a central, like you need to have a distributed ledger to capture all this, right? There is no single entity who can be trusted with the central ledger of what thing happened, what data was exchanged. So that's where also like the blockchain comes into picture here.
Okay, so it's scalable. Thinking about Internet of Things, when everything becomes intelligent, my plant has its own identity, I have a tracker, my computer, everything is, it can scale. And Tara, you said that IOTA, one of the advantages is that it scales and gets better when scaling. The bigger it gets, the better it gets. Normally from our real normal life, we know like, oh, if something gets bigger, I need more hard drive, I need everything more computing power, I have to buy this. But now with IOTA, the more people get inside, the bigger the whole system gets, the better, right?
Yes, of course. Like, I'm going to be very honest, there are physical limitations to all of these systems, right? We can't neglect them, so it's not going to be like forever. But I think it's one of the big things going to IoT, but also going back to EPSI, the European Blockchain Services Infrastructure. What all these use cases need is scalability, because not just one person in the EU is gonna get their passport checked, but thousands and millions. Not just one car or IoT device is gonna communicate with another, but this will be like billions of transactions every day, if we believe all these reports coming out. So the question with a lot of this blockchain or distributed ledger technology is, how do we scale? And we've seen that the old way, or the usual way of doing it, which we just explained in terms of proof of work, you go in your Google Sheet, one row after the other row. It's a very linear process. And I mean, just even mathematically, that linear processes are not going to scale as fast as parallel ones. So this was one of the foundational understandings of IOTA, and where the founders back in the day said, instead of having one block of transactions after the other, verified and added to the network and to our notebook or whatever, what if each new incoming transaction could verify 2 existing transactions? And instead of this growing as a chain, it grows as what we call the tangle. So it's more of a networked type of scalability that we have in our underlying data structure. I think a lot of people in the distributed ledger space are working on a lot of different scalability solutions right now. Our approach, called a decentralized or directed acyclical graph, is one approach, and it's been working quite well in the past. Is also definitely one of the things that the European Commission is been looking for, and a lot of our enterprise clients that we work with and partners have been looking for. And that's how we solve this type of scalability. There's other approaches, and I guess in the long run, especially concerning digital identity and IoT topics, it will be the case that those underlying protocols that are able to cater to the scalability demand without sacrificing certain other requirements, such as security and whatnot, are the ones who are most likely to be able to provide these proofs that Fabiana just talked about.
Great. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tara, for the explanation of distributed ledger technology compared to, I would say, the traditional blockchain technology. Okay, so let's maybe, Manan, how could I use Ocean Protocol for a wearable tech device? Let's say the use case is we want to donate our data to a company that's researching COVID-19 symptoms. And they want to know more about the symptoms. I'm wearing a wearable device that tracks my temperature and my pulse.
Yeah.
How can I use Ocean Protocol to give my data to a company that then can help other people? But I don't want to know them to know everything about myself.
Yeah.
How would that work?
Yeah. So the answer is the data unions. So there's a new concept that's gaining a lot of traction, is the data unions. What is a data union? So the idea is this: the data from your watch or your wearable device individually, it doesn't help much, right? Because it doesn't have a lot of data to be for AI or for anyone to get valuable insights of, right? But if we gather together data from the million watches or from thousands of watches, right? Now there is a pattern that can be developed from this data, right? AI can be trained, machine learning models can be trained, and useful results can be extracted. In case of the COVID situation, right? If someone is researching to put the vaccine, right? And this, we are talking about the data from the COVID tests or the COVID patients. Data from like thousands of the patients can be collected and aggregated together, right? So when you aggregate the data, your individual identity stops being existing, right? So it doesn't exist. So no one can identify you individually. It's like, okay, the data is about like thousands patients, or let's say 1 million patients from Germany, for example. Yeah. And of course, there are ways to make the data pseudo-anonymous, right? It means that instead of like putting your name, address, or personal identifier information, we can just replace that with some other useful information, like your age bracket, for example, yeah, or your demographic, or which city you live in, right? And then this becomes more pseudo-anonymous, right? And then still this data is still useful because personally or the AI doesn't need to know that, okay, this data is from Thomas. Yeah, they want to know is, okay, I have this COVID medicine, this is the age group, right? And this is the, let's say, symptoms of the patient, and I need to just check that it works on that or not, right? A and B testing or various type of testing. And that's how basically you use Ocean to securely share the data. When you aggregate it, and then even the people are accessing that data, there is no harm in sharing the data itself.
So for the researcher, there's a benefit that because of the whole blockchain technology, they know that it's true, the data is true. For me, I have an advantage that I can get something in exchange. I can give my data and they give me maybe a token or money, but I'm still anonymous.
Of COVID vaccine, right?
Sorry?
They put you in the priority list of the COVID vaccine. So some other perks.
Or something like that. So there's an exchange, but without the typical limitations that we knew so far. Either I give my data and they know everything, but now there's a third way or some other variations. Thank you so much to all of you. We're running out of time. I'm so sorry. I would love to talk much longer with you. But before we come to an end, I would like to ask you, how do you see blockchain or crypto technologies in general impact this world? Let's say, what is the biggest change in the next 10 years? Do you think blockchain will change the internet just like the internet did? Is it as important as the invention of fire, or is it something, it's just a hype? And what will it be if it's something cool? What will the world look like? Sorry for this complex question, but I think I would really love to know more about your opinion here. I don't know who wants to go first.
I can go first. So
yeah,
I see in the coming years, let's say 10 years from now, there will be a mass migration towards the blockchain. The reason being, even right now, it's complicated, right? As some of the audiences said, that to understand and things, right? But this is again the new technology, as Tara mentioned, right? In 10 years, there will be a lot of tools developed on top of the blockchain. So people using the blockchain, they even don't need to know that this application is actually running on the blockchain, right? So right now, if you're using Facebook, right, you can use Facebook built on blockchain, just like you're using Facebook right now. So there will be no special need that you will have to do. So the user experience will drastically improve in the next 10 years. Yeah. When user experience improves and the benefits of using blockchains, increases, of course, a lot of people will move to blockchain. Even the government institutions, like they are doing the POCs right now. But in the next 10 years, they will have a really good idea of what they want to migrate to blockchain, which departments, and how they want to handle things. So we will see a lot of changes on the blockchain. And the money that you see today, like even euro or dollars or the fiat, we call it a fiat money. Yeah, that will have a digital version built on blockchain. So this is how I see 10 years panning out.
Great. Okay, thank you, Manan. Yeah, who wants to go next? Fabiane, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, sure. So to be honest, I am less optimistic than Manan that blockchain will be as like being everywhere, to be honest, because I think today, or as of today, we have too little need to move our systems. So many of us are selling, I wouldn't exclude myself, selling our data for free. And we have very little incentive to move from our current systems to our future systems. Being that said, I still think that there are going to be applications, which we already see, where blockchain does add value. I don't think it's going to be everywhere, but I think especially those applications where you can only store proofs because you only have to prove something without revealing all your data, those will come, I believe. And I think there are going to be business processes where blockchain will be included, but I don't think that blockchain will interrupt as much our worlds as, for example, the internet did.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, okay. Thank you so much. Tara?
Yeah, so I'm going to end on an optimistic note again. I think blockchain technologies are going to impact our world a lot. I think 10 years is a really, really, really long time in blockchain land. So I'm, who knows? But I think there's three main things. I think for the individuals and users, there is this whole idea of value online. And I think that's going to change stuff. And I do believe that, in some use cases, such as we did see with the COVID app, at least in Germany, people did take care and were, very adamant about the fact that this works in a decentralized way, that none of your personal data gets shared. I think it's a growing topic. It's going to become more serious, and there will be applications where you can monetize it, where we use this Internet of Value for shared platform ownership and shared ownership of things that exist online right now. So I think that's what is going to change for the individual. I think on the business side, that blockchain and DLT do have a lot of potential to, bring about new business models for existing companies. I'm very excited personally about the topic of supply chains and how, for example, we can track and trace also through digital identities and other means using distributed ledger technology. We can trace products across the supply chain. We can make it easier to share trade documentation. Trade finance is a huge topic. And within this industry, I think it is a huge disruptor and can bring real value because the trade system internationally is quite fragmented. Everybody has their own jurisdictions, etc. And distributed ledger has the ability to bring these people together without needing to rely on a central Google that now, traces all their products throughout the supply chain. So that's something I'm very excited about. Also the mobility space for sure. around smart mobility use cases where digital identities, car wallets, etc., can play a huge role. Yeah. And then maybe the last one that I'm personally very, very into is that I also believe that blockchain and distributed ledger should be seen as a governing technology.
Oh, yeah.
So it can be a means that people use to find shared decisions. And I think especially this is something that has not been explored that much. It's quite a recent phenomenon, although it's been theoretically discussed in the past. And I'm very excited to see how people in online communities will use this technology to make good decisions together.